So continuing on with Lecture Day 8 and Alexander the Great. So as we just said, he conquered the city of Tyre in 7 months, which is absolutely unbelievable. Especially, remember, he built a bridge out of dirt and wood to make it there. Now, of course, it was his army doing it, he didn't. But it is still an incredible achievement of engineering to be able to do that with this half-mile bridge out into the middle of the sea, or half a mile out to the sea. As he's conquered there, he started moving down south towards Gaza. This is actually where, if you ever hear about the Gaza Strip being a part in the news, where especially fought over with Israel at times and other nations and Palestine and stuff, and people today, that is the area today, Gaza right there. Well, Alexander makes it down to the city of Gaza, and he again, it's a Persian city, okay, remember Egypt at this time is owned by Persia, and he's had 2 major victories against Persia, and he's attacked a couple other cities like Tyre, Halicarnassus, and a few others that refused to stand down. Well, in this case, Gaza also refuses to stand down, so he attacks the city in 332 BCE. When he wins and defeats the army defending the city, he captures the Persian satrap, the leader of the Persians of the city, and he drags him behind his own chariot. So Alexander gets on the chariot and actually ties the Persian satrap, the leader, to the back of the chariot and basically rides through the city streets with the Persian leader being dragged behind the chariot as punishment. Of course, the satrap is killed by the end of this, by being dragged through the city streets behind the chariot. But as you can see what happens when Alexander is not is refused or is attacked back or defended against. He is very harsh in his punishments to people. And so continuing on, Alexander, when he gets into the rest of Egypt, they welcome him. They are happy to be without the Persians over them. They are happy for liberation and happy to be part of Alexander's new empire. Alexander is even made pharaoh. They crown him as pharaoh. And at that point, after a few weeks and months, he ends up actually creating the city of Alexandria. It is actually the second city by that name that he has founded. He founded another one up in Asia Minor, but this one is the most important one. He eventually founds about 18 cities named Alexandria, with usually last names to each one based on where they are. But Alexandria, the one that we will talk about in the future, dealing with Egypt, is right there. It is on the mouth of the Nile River, right up against the coast of the Mediterranean. It is where the Nile and the Mediterranean Sea meet, river to sea. And it becomes a very important city later on, and the Egyptians keep on growing it during that period after Alexander leaves with his army. Alexander also personally travels out to Siwa, where there is an oracle there to Ammon, okay, to the god Ammon, or Zeus, depending on which one you want to go with, either the god of the sun or life, right, or Zeus. The translations to the Greeks, they figured it was Zeus was the same one as Ammon at the time, and so he went to the oracle there, and we are not exactly sure what that oracle said, but his request and what he had been telling all of his companions is he wanted to ask if he is going to basically either be a god or is a son of a god. And the second question was, is he going to rule the world? And we don't know what was said, but he took it as he got the answers he was looking for because he came out of the oracle very happy, or interpreted what they said as what he wanted to hear. Darius at this point sends a letter to Alexander while he is building the city of Alexandria and journeying out into the desert at Siwa. And Darius II, of the king of Persia, is basically asking for peace, saying that, yes, you can keep Egypt. Yes, you can keep what you've already taken over. I want to keep the rest, Mesopotamia and the rest of Persia on the far side of Mesopotamia. And Parmenion, one of Alexander's generals, gives Alexander advice saying, let's just end it here. Let's sign a peace treaty with Darius. You've conquered more land that is in than all of Greece combined, and what Macedonia had been beforehand. You've basically doubled the size of Macedon, if not tripled it, and we can just have peace. And maybe in a few years we can go back to war against Persia, or we can set our sights on somewhere else first. And Alexander's response is, so would I if I were Parmenion, but I am Alexander. Okay, when Parmenion basically was saying, I would take the peace treaty, and that's what we should do. And Alexander's response is, so would I if I were Parmenion, but I am Alexander. And it basically finishes with, I'm not going to take that peace treaty, I'm going to beat Darius myself. And so that is exactly what ends up happening. Alexander and his army marches out of Egypt and starts marching northwards towards the top of the Fertile Crescent, where they end up having the Battle of Gaugamela, the third major battle against the Persian army that he will fight. Okay? And so this is going to be a massive battle on October 1st, 331 BCE. 331 BCE on October 1st. Persia has an absolutely massive army at this battle, okay? They said back then that it was about 1 million men, but again, just like when Xerxes ended up invading Greece, we can kind of divide that by 4, divide that by 10, and so we really have come up with numbers based on what they were saying, to where at most it was up to about 250,000 men, which is 250,000 men. So only about a fourth the size of what people said it was back then. Again, numbers got inflated when they would kind of look at a large number of people and go, oh, that number is this. You know, they wouldn't actually count, right? And reports would embellish it, but you can kind of divide those numbers by 10 to get the real number, or by fourth. It depends on the numbers, okay, and the different accounts. And so we think as historians today that it was probably only about 250,000 men. Alexander at this point has increased his army to about 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry, when beforehand it was only 40,000 men. Now the problem is while he has his big army, the Persians, and yes, they have a lot of men there, the biggest portion of the Persian army is cavalry. About 50% of it is cavalry or chariots, which is a huge amount. Of course, you know what a chariot is. This is a chariot, and they are pulled by horses. And they have these large scythes out to the side, these big blades, these swords basically sticking out of the axle or the hubcap of the wheel. And that would go riding through soldiers and cutting off their legs, okay, and killing them. And that was the purpose of what a chariot would do. Cavalry, of course, they've got their men on their spears, but the good thing for the Macedonians is that pikemen with their big spears are really good against cavalry. Horses don't usually do very well charging into a huge line of spears, and the chariots the same way, because the horse has to pull the chariot. Another tactic that Parmenion, the general of Alexander's troops for the most of this battle, or at least the infantry, comes up with is to open lanes between the regiments of his soldiers, where if a chariot comes flying at him and at his men, they'll just kind of step aside. That's exactly like in this picture, that the soldiers will clump up, get very close together, and watch the chariot go past, and then they will take their pikes or their sarissas, and they will stab the soldiers or the horses in the back. And that the chariot scythes, these big scythe size things, these blades on the sides, won't cut their troops down, because they've opened the lane so that the thing will just drive past. Alexander once again leads the cavalry, and he almost reaches Darius, very similar to when he fought it at Issus, but he doesn't even get as close as he did at Issus. He got within throwing range of Darius there. He gets within sight of Darius, but very close, but not close enough, and Darius at that point retreats again from the battle. And the Persian losses are around 40,000 soldiers killed, and the Macedonian losses are about 1,200 killed, so 1,200 killed. And the elephants. The elephants were a big issue in this battle. A lot of these Macedonian losses were due to these elephants charging at them and them having to fight against these war elephants. These elephants, these spears, kind of bounce off elephant skin. Elephant skin is at least an inch thick and is very hard and leathery, and very tough. And trying to get a spear or something like that, or an arrow through that, is very difficult. And so they understand, the Macedonians understand, that when enemies have elephants, it's an enemy that is to be reckoned with. And that will be foreshadowing for next lecture in Lecture 9. But let me finish off Lecture 8 first. Aftermath of the Battle of Gaugamela, the capital of Babylon and Susa, both of them, as Alexander kind of marches from here, from Gaugamela towards to Babylon and then to Susa, both of them surrender. Both of them surrender without a fight. In fact, when Alexander's army gets to these cities, his army and his troops and him are basically given a parade. That his army can walk through the city like a parade. And as you can see, kind of this is a depiction from a movie, where it's the hanging gardens of Babylon with the trees and stuff on the garden terraces and stuff, as all the crowd of the people of Babylon are out in the city streets watching Alexander and his army march down the street. And they're hailing them as heroes. Supposedly, when he gets to Susa, the same thing happens. And in fact, at Susa, people are said to have been throwing flowers out of windows at Alexander, as well as in Babylon, possibly as well. They're hailing him as a hero because he has basically beaten the Persian army. And they understand that, no, if our ruler isn't going to be able to defend us, we might as well welcome the next guy, and get on his good side. Eventually, he captures the city of Persepolis, which is the third capital. Persia had three capitals: Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis. Those were some of the major cities that were in the Empire of Persia, and he captures each one of them. Of course, these ones surrendered to him without a fight. Persepolis, they have to fight at. It's the last stronghold fighting against him, and when it finally is captured, the Macedonian army throws a massive party for about 2 days in the city. On the second or so day of the party, part of the city catches fire during this massive party, and it gets to the point where the fire burns out of control. And during this fire, the entire city is ravaged by fire, and it completely destroys most of the city. As well as the palace of Persepolis. The palace, as well as most of the city, are burned down. Now, a lot of people wonder, historians-wise later, wonder if the Macedonians and the Greek mercenaries that were alongside them did this on purpose. Because it's 150 years after the taking of the city of Athens by Xerxes. Remember when Xerxes, during the Persian War, walked into the city and it was completely empty, and he burned it to the ground? People wonder, since it's 150 years later, is it revenge? Was Alexander responsible for this? Were some of the Greeks responsible for this? And the fact is, we don't know. We'll probably never know. We don't know now, and unless some kind of recovery of some kind of artifact or story or writing pops up, we'll never know. But it is possibly done as revenge. The last couple things after that are Darius III, or Darius II, and Darius III after that, are both killed by Artaxerxes IV. The kings of Persia are both killed. King Darius II, as well as his son, are both killed by Artaxerxes, this satrap, who used to go by Bessus. He was a satrap, a governor of part of Persia, the far end of Persia, this reddish area of Persia. And Artaxerxes, or Bessus, decides he's going to become the new king of Persia, and maybe Alexander will reward him if he kills Darius. And so he kills Darius, executes both Dariuses, rather, and sends their heads and their bodies to Alexander. And Alexander is like, what's this gift? And then he sees what it is, and he's kind of angry when he gets it, because he's like, you don't do this to royalty. it will set a bad example where other people will try to kill other kings, maybe even him. And so he actually orders Artaxerxes IV to be killed. Bessus was really hoping to be the new king of Persia, what was left of Persia, by renaming himself Artaxerxes IV after Darius was killed. And so that's why he goes by Bessus or Artaxerxes. Alexander then ends up deciding that he will start this Persian tradition of proskynesis, where, as you can see, a person would kneel to their ground and slowly lower their body until they were basically kissing the floor. This was a Persian tradition that the Persian people would do for their king. This was something the Greeks never did. They never even bowed to their kings in Greece. They would salute them, but they would not bow. And Alexander starts ordering his Greek troops, his Macedonian troops and other Greeks, to start doing this Persian tradition, because he sees that all the Persian soldiers that are now swearing allegiance to him are doing it, and he says, well, the rest of them should as well. And so he's kind of changing the culture of his army, and some of them like it, and some of them are very hesitant. They feel that this is not Greek. They should not be doing this. And that will start causing problems in the future in Lecture 9. There are also problems here in Greece as well, back in Greece, all the way in Greece. So he's out here in Persia, okay, all the way in Persepolis. Here's the Fertile Crescent. Here's Alexandria, number 2, in Egypt. He came from here. And Sparta down here, this little area right around here, the king of Sparta, Agis III, decides to fight back. Well, Agis III raises his Spartan army and tries to get some of the other Greek city-states to fight. He even goes to Demosthenes. Remember, Demosthenes was that person that wrote those speeches about Philip, saying that we need to resist. Well, Demosthenes realizes this is futile. This is a futile attempt by Sparta to resist against Alexander's army, which at this point is all over the place, and is so much bigger and more powerful than Sparta will be. And at this point, Sparta had lost most of its population due to bad birth issues, as we talked about in last lecture, and so, and Antipater, the general that is left in charge of Greece by Alexander, raises an army in Macedon and as of other city-states, and he puts the rebellion down. This rebellion was a series of rebellions caused by King Agis III of Sparta, and he actually, Antipater actually executes Agis himself, or has him killed in the year 330 B.C.E. Alexander the Great at this point has reached the edge of the Persian Empire in this area right here, and he plans on going further into this red area, as well as up here, and exploring these areas. And so, as he is preparing to do that, he knows that there are many perils that lay ahead, and his army is hearing rumors of all of these perils, and we will discuss all of those in the next lecture. And this is a map of the ancient world of the time, and this is Greece. Here is Italy, here is Spain, England, North Africa, Egypt and the Nile, and Persia. And at this point, he's conquered basically up to this line. And he plans on going into what is present-day India, and even called India on the map back then, or a couple other different things. But this is a map of the world of Alexander the Great with ocean all around it, which is a bit wrong, right? But that's where he plans on going next time, into India. So we will talk about that in the next lecture video at the beginning of Lecture 9.